Welcome to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm Dan Rowe, and I've masterminded the ascent of local favorites to global dominators. This isn't your usual get-to-know-you chat. We're diving deep. We're revealing the raw truths about franchise wealth building. With over 30 years in the trenches, I'm spilling it all. If you have an appetite for unfiltered tales and the hidden blueprints of franchise prosperity, buckle up. We're diving in. All right, welcome back to Smart Franchising with FranSmart, and today my guest is Peter Holt, the CEO of Joint Chiropractic, with almost 1,000 locations. I met Peter originally at Orlando Airport. He was getting off a plane I was waiting to get on, and I noticed that you were wearing a Joint Chiropractic shirt, and I think carrying a briefcase from mailbox, et cetera. And I said, I know this guy's in franchising. So I knew he was a good guy, went up to him and struck up a conversation. So highly recommend you folks do that. But so Peter, you've been in this business longer than I have, 35 years as a hired gun, sharpshooter. So congratulations.
Actually, Dan, it's 38 years now.
38. Congratulations.
It goes quick.
Well, good. Well, so just for background, so how about you give our audience a little bit of background on yourself and then how you joined Joint Chiropractic?
Sure. No, it's a great question. I actually started my career in franchising at the International Franchise Association. And that and kind of a funny story. I have a master's degree in Latin American history from the University of London. And all I wanted to do was policy analysis through U.S. Latin American relations. That's it. And so if that's what you're going to do, when I left London, I went back to Washington, D.C. to find my fame and fortune and do policy analysis. And to make a long story short, and through these series of coincidences, I got hired by the International Franchise Association. And this is 1986. The only thing I knew about franchising back then is that McDonald's is a franchise, and I'm not particularly fond of the McDonald's food. And I knew even less what a trade association did. And my job was assistant director of development, and I was basically selling memberships. And so I was running around the country, meeting with companies like The Joint, convincing them to join the association and make sure that they renewed their dues the next year. And in that process, just absolutely fell in love with the business model of franchising. And so I still had this international interest. I ended up creating the international division for the association. And so then my job was to run around the world working with the Foreign Commercial Service and U.S. embassies and create business appointments for franchisors in the United States who wanted to go overseas. And so I was doing that, and I was in the catbird seat. I was just traveling around the world, having a blast, and one of the members said, "Hey, how would you like to do this for me?" And so I ended up joining a yogurt concept out of Dallas. I can't believe it's yogurt, and I think it was 1990.
I remember those guys.
Yeah, it was an amazing concept and was really built up the international division and just have not looked back since and worked through just a series of incredible franchise systems over the years, culminating now, of course, at The Joint.
Well, great. To me, the Joint Chiropractic is this genius concept because I never heard of it. And then all of a sudden I see them, and now I see them everywhere. And normally when I think of chiropractic offices, they're in like medical spaces, which make me think of hospitals and other places I don't want to be. When I see Joint Chiropractic, you guys are near Starbucks in the grocery store and all the places that I like to be. So it's smart. Tell me the story of Joint. Like, why do you think it's been so successful? You've created a category that didn't already exist.
Yeah, it's such a great story. And it really was a doctor of chiropractic who had this idea in 1999 he wanted to bring chiropractic to the masses. And you're absolutely right. Back then, the only way to get chiropractic care, it was in the medical facility, an office building. It was behind the curtain, hard to access. And he's like, no. I want it retail. I want it affordable. I want it accessible. I want no insurance. I want it to be super easy because I know everybody will benefit from it. And I can remember a story he was telling me at the time. I was talking to his wife, who's now his ex-wife, who is actually a franchisee of ours today. And she was telling me the story is that they were literally, just to your point, sitting in a Starbucks. And he's looking around and he's like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do for chiropractic. And she was just scared to death because at that point, the reason why chiropractic clinics were behind the wall and in the office building and up the medical facility is they couldn't afford the rents in a retail space because they didn't have the volume to justify it. And so she was scared to death. They opened up the clinic. And it was an amazing success. You know, they had music, they had art on the wall, people came in, and it was incredible. Now, what we all know in franchising, when you have that retail concept and you have your customers coming in and they're like, oh my gosh, I love this product and service so much. Are you franchised? You know? And so Dr. Gerritson's thinking, why not? And so in 2003, he started franchising. Now, he was a great doctor with a brilliant idea. And I'm telling you right now, he was a very lousy franchisor. He never joined the International Franchise Association. He never understood the methodology of franchising, which is so different from the concept of chiropractic. And so now fast forward, in 2010, these two brothers were in Austin, Texas, and they saw one of his units in operation, and they said, oh my gosh, this is what I've been looking for. So they tracked down Dr. Gerritson. The company actually is in bankruptcy at the time. And that they say, look, we want to buy the company from you. They come to an agreement. They basically give them stock in a private company that who knows if it's going to be worth anything, and they go on their own. So the Joint Corp was formed. That's the company I'm working for. And that was in March of 2010. Now, when we went public in November of 2014, when the Joint Corp was formed, 8 franchisees came into that business. So 1999, 2010, 8 franchisees. That's not franchising. And so when we went public in November of 2014, less than 4 years later, we had 242 franchise units on the ground in operation. Now that is franchising. And how did that happen? What happened is that the new buyers understood that you have to, if you're going to run a franchise system, you're running 2 parallel, unrelated businesses. Concept, chiropractic, frozen yogurt, postal business communication services, and methodology. And that's franchising. Now, what I find so interesting is the methodology is absolutely agnostic to concept. It doesn't matter. So I can do frozen yogurt, I can do chiropractic care, I can do postal and business and communication services, and they all have their own unique attributes. But this methodology of the running and building of a franchise system transcends concept. And if you understand that you and what happens, especially with these founders, they come in love with concept. That's what they know best. And it's great. They can focus on concept. But if you're going to franchise and you don't take the time to understand how to build and manage a franchise system, it fails. And that's why there's so many young franchisors out there with these brilliant ideas that will go nowhere because they can't make that leap of understanding that it's not about their concept anymore. It's about the methodology. And that, to me, was so interesting is, let's say that those brothers didn't show up. What would have happened is, okay, you know what? There you go. Chiropractic. We knew it couldn't be franchised. That never should have been franchised. See, look, it didn't work. And it had nothing to do with the concept. The concept was brilliant. And so, fast forward today, now we're up to almost 1,000 units.
That's awesome. So when you say methodologies, you mean systems, because franchising is a business of systems. And you hit the nail on the head. It's not the Five Guys burger. It's not the chiropractic back, the procedure. It's the system of how do you replicate that, right?
Absolutely, Dan. And again, it's such a critical point of franchising. I have people come to me all the time and say, oh, I've got this great idea and I'm going to franchise it. And can you help me do it? And I'm like, okay, tell me your concept. Tell me what you're doing. Show me your operations manual. I'm like, no, it's an idea. And I'm like, you know what? Franchising is a methodology. If you don't have a business, it doesn't matter how undeveloped that operating model is. And we all start with an undeveloped operating model. You have nothing to franchise. Franchising is just a methodology of growth. It has advantages and disadvantages. And if you understand that and apply it to your concept, you can see if it makes sense to grow your business through that methodology. But the core of every franchise system has to start with an operating model.
So what are some things that the brothers did differently than the founder to have success where he was struggling? They became successful. What are just a couple things that they did?
The number one thing they did is they bought management. That it turns out that John Leonisio, who is the founder of Massage Envy, had sold out to private equity. And so they literally, out of the blue, sought him out and said, look, we just bought this concept. Would you come run it? And he did. And so the difference between Dr. Gerritsen and John Leonisio is John Leonisio profoundly understood the franchise model. He understood how to build one. He built a company himself. And so taking those experiences and applying them to a model that's sound got us to the 242 units in a relatively short period of time. And so it's management. And again, we can talk a lot about the challenges that we face in franchising. And it's really about, it's about resources. And the two resources are people and cash. And you need them both.
So of your franchisees, are they all chiropractors?
Well, again, that was one of the idea of Dr. Gerritsen as a chiropractor is like, how could anyone but a chiropractor run a chiropractic clinic? So under his model, he would only sell to existing chiropractors. Well, what we recognize is, wait a minute, this is about running a business, and I can hire the doctor just as easily as the doctor can be the franchisee. And so if we look at our network right now, about 35%, or let's say 30% of our franchisees are in fact the doctor of chiropractic. And then of course the balance is the business person who is hiring the doctor to run the clinic. And that's one of the challenges, again, when you think about buying a franchise and you look at the Joint, you think, what? I don't have to be a chiropractor in order to be a franchisee of this concept? And no, you don't. And so that's it's one of the hurdles you overcome, because everyone would think, oh, don't I have to be a chiropractor if I'm running a chiropractic clinic?
Yeah. Yeah, I would have thought, but yeah. So how does a non-chiropractic find a chiropractor partner or a chiropractor to hire?
Well, it turns out, if you look at the chiropractic industry today, it's about a $20 billion industry. And what's interesting is it's absolutely defined by the independent practitioner. It is the most fragmented market I've ever seen. There's, of that $20 billion industry, 40,000 independent practitioners are in operation. You have 16 accredited schools in the United States that graduate doctors of chiropractic, and they graduate roughly, say, 2,500 doctors a year. And that you have a lot of these chiropractors in independent practice, they're struggling. It's a challenge to get the volume or to get the number of patients. And so it's not unusual for existing doctors who have their own clinic or their own practice will come and work part-time at the Joint. And so we see that a lot. So our franchisees are hiring doctors that are out there. Now, turns out it's a medical service. And so if you're going to be a doctor of chiropractic, you must be registered in the state in which you're operating. Because all medical is governed on a state level in terms of licensing. And so that you can go state by state, and there's over 70,000 licensed practitioners in the United States today. Now, 30,000 of them don't practice, for all kinds of different reasons, but that still leaves you that 40,000 doctors of chiropractic out there that are, trying to keep their business together and build it and grow.
And you guys have pretty focused services, because a lot of chiropractic offices that I see, they advertise doing all sorts of stuff, like hormone therapy, biohacking, all kinds of stuff, like kind of whatever the flavor of the day is. You guys are pretty focused, right?
Right. And it's kind of interesting. I actually have been using chiropractic care for 38 years. And it's not why I have the job, but it's given me a really interesting point of view from the perspective of the patient. And so I was just a traditional patient. So what do? I find a doctor, I make an appointment, I get an x-ray, we walk through all these different modalities. There's offering me supplements, pillows, hormone therapy, massage therapy. And I always thought that was because they cared most about my health. Now, what I've come to realize is that poor little doctor is going to see only 20 of me that day. And he needs to click on that insurance form as many little clicks as he can get and sell me as many supplements and orthotics and muscle stem and whatever else he was offering just to survive. What makes the Joint so unique is that we are not in any way changing chiropractic care. And you're right, we right now only do one service. That's chiropractic care. We don't sell you pillows or supplements or orthotics or CBD oils. And so because our revolution is not changing chiropractic care, the only thing we're offering you is chiropractic care. Our revolution is access to chiropractic care. And so by putting it in that retail setting, making it affordable, making it accessible, making it easy to trial, you're sitting there as a consumer like, oh my gosh, there's the Joint. That's not cannabis, that's chiropractic. I'll go in. And so it's volume that distinguishes us really from any other practice that's out there. So if that average independent practitioner is seeing 20 people a day, our average is over 60 a day. And that's what makes the difference.
Wow. And is your revenue model, what percentage is insurance driven?
Zero. That we take no insurance, that it's an all cash business. And this is, again, one of the challenges is in this country is insurance takes over more and more of the delivery of health services. It's only going to become more dysfunctional. Because I don't want to shock you, Dan, but the insurance companies actually don't care about your health.
Well, and try to find a doctor who likes dealing with insurance companies, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. So you've solved something else there. You've got a cash pay. Your revenue model too is membership driven. So people are essentially prepaying. They're prepaying you whether they have a procedure or not, essentially.
Exactly. And then, so what we're doing is that, again, the typical issue that you face in a medical service, whether it's chiropractic or dentistry or whatever, it's collections. It's getting the billings into the insurance and getting your reimbursements from them, and then collections from the parts from your patients that don't pay it. And so that you have a whole department that does nothing but collections. And so you've eliminated that whole conversation because it's an all cash business. And you're right that if you look at the concept, 85% of the sales of that traditional clinic is memberships. So you pay a monthly fee. It's super easy to join. It's super easy to cancel. You'll get 4 adjustments in that month period. It's, depending on the market, it's typically $79 a month. And so it's a super, super simple operating model.
So it's very affordable to be a customer. It's easy to be a customer because you put the locations where people are anyways, not in medical offices. You make it affordable because it's a monthly payment, and it's a pretty low when you think about under $100 and I can come a couple times a month. Like, that's pretty cheap compared to what it would cost me to go to a chiropractor normally.
Absolutely. And there's no question we're the value proposition in the industry. And in fact, quite frankly, in the early years is that we were seen as a threat. Like any disruptor to an industry, your traditional people in that industry are threatened by the change you're making in the marketplace. And they're saying, how can you be providing a quality adjustment that I do for $150, even though I only get $29 from my reimbursement from my insurance company for $29 at the joint? And you're devaluing the industry. And it's kind of funny. In the early years, especially the schools and associations, because, Dan, you've been involved in franchising for so long. We go to these franchise conferences, and these young franchisors get up there, and I'm going to be the McDonald's of frozen yogurt, and I'm going to be the McDonald's of the automotive market, and I'm going to be the McDonald's. And, of course, in these schools and associations, they're like, the Joint, they're the McDonald's of chiropractic, and they're not saying it as a compliment. So we spent a lot of time really educating the schools and the associations that, we're actually one of the best things that's happened to chiropractic in terms of making it more visible, making it more accessible. The biggest challenge with chiropractic is nobody knows about it. And if you're a baby boomer, you're carrying the stigma associated with it, like this is voodoo medicine, or it's not a real doctor. And of course, that's simply not the case.
So some of the other things that you do to get your brand to 1,000 units, what are some things that you can offer up to other emerging franchisors who may be, under 10 or under 20 units? If they ever want to get to your size, what are a couple of things that they need to do?
Well, I think, and this is true for all of us, is the first thing is you have to have a sound concept. Is franchising is not going to take a bad concept and make it better. This is back This is back to if you don't have an operating model, if you don't have the experience of a successful business, and this is the challenge that so many of these young franchisors go through, is they do have that great model and they are making money and their customers love what they're doing, and they say, hey, I love your product or service so much. Are you franchised? And now this is that critical moment. Okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to learn? Now, they can't afford a Dan Rowe to come and run them for them, but they need to make sure they're tapping into as much as they can to understand, okay, don't be confused with concept. Focus on the systems I need to put in place to operate a franchise model. And that's very, very different than whatever that running a hamburger place or whatever the concept is. And so if you can't move beyond the soundness of the model. Now, the model can change over time because people's use of that concept it changes over time. I spent a lot of time with Mailbox, etc., and it's an amazing, amazing company. And now they're the UPS store. But I'm going to tell you, in the early years of Mailbox, etc., was an incredibly tough row to hoe because you are offering a brand new product and service that never existed. There was no private mailbox. There was no retail shipping. There was no professional packing. And as people over time discovered those services, like, oh, wow, I love that. That's interesting. But at the beginning, it's like, what? Is this where I buy a mailbox for my home? And so it was you struggled as a young franchisee. So the soundness of that concept where it is today was very different when it was founded in 1980. But there was enough of that soundness that it continued to survive and evolve and add a whole series of other products and services to the point where you're now a concept that's over 6,000 in the United States and another 1,500, or I think, 1,500 outside the United States. And so that concept has to be there. You've got to have something to work with. Otherwise, it doesn't matter.
Other than the concept, what's the next thing that's important? You had mentioned that the brothers hired John. Like that
Right.
sounds like going deep on your team, being committed that, hey, you don't hire someone like John with his background because you think it might blow up, right? It's
Right.
because you're investing in the company you're trying to build.
Exactly. This is the challenge. You have to, and now we're back to the two things that run all businesses: people and capital. And that, so when you're in that young franchisor and you're starting out and you're trying to figure this out, you need to bring in the highest quality franchise people that you can afford. You need to join the International Franchise Association because there's so much. You are not the first franchisor in the world to start a business. In fact, there's hundreds of franchisors starting every year. And there's so much that you can learn from the young franchisors, learn from the more mature franchisors, because you don't have to make those same mistakes. This is why I talk about franchising. Dan, do you know what really franchising is all about? You know what? I have so many different ways to define franchising. And you know what it really is? Franchising is the business of selling mistakes. That's what we do. Think about it. I mean, where did that operating model come from? And how did it evolve over time? Well, you did it, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to do that again. That about killed the company. And oh my gosh, I did that, and that's working better. And so you're taking that experience. The difference is instead of applying it just to that one unit, you're sharing it with your entire network, however big it is. And so it's bringing in those best practices. And so what's happening is you are benefiting from the mistakes made by others and the experiences by others that helps accelerate your growth and helps minimize the mistakes you're going to make. You'll still make them, but it's that leveraging of those mistakes is truly the foundation of every operating model in existence.
Yeah. The good thing about getting into the franchise association, you're really building a peer group. I mean, you're building a peer group. You're forcing yourself to learn new stuff, and you can't just manage your business day to day. Like you've got to make some time to learn and grow and bring in some new ideas and to be able to course correct your business.
Dan, absolutely. And this is to me what I found so interesting and kind of makes my story slightly unique is that most people fall into franchising purely through concept. That I was working for a hamburger chain and it turned out to be franchise. I was working for a pizza place. I was working for, automotive aftermarket, whatever it is. There's 300 different industries that are utilizing the methodology of franchising, and they all come in through concept. Now, when I'm running the membership or selling membership at the IFA and I'm working with these hundreds of different industries and I'm realizing they all have some similar problems in lead generation and the transfer of technology in a relatively short period of time and setting up operational standards and all the different elements that are just fundamental to a franchise program, and recognizing, you know what, wow, these solutions transcend concept. And so what's weird is I've never started with concept. So for me, I came into the world of franchising through methodology. And so I've never been tied to the end. It's like, okay, my world is through food or through all these different, basically concept.
Hmm. What do you, so good, solid concept has to be, customers have to love it. I mean, customers vote with their wallet. So it's easy to tell if customers like a concept. It's got to be financially viable, like so much so that the franchisees want to keep investing in it, right? Keep building more units, hopefully, because for a franchisor, the most profitable franchisee is a big one. big
Yep.
multi-unit franchisee. And so if your franchisees don't want to keep reinvesting the profit to build new units, you got to focus right there. Cause I mean, otherwise you could start franchising, you'll sell a couple deals and then quickly realize that you're in quicksand. Like
Yep.
you've got a concept that's not sustainable. You got a contract, you took someone's money, and all of a sudden you're wishing that you weren't in franchising.
No, exactly. And this is your protection. It's really, really, really hard. And this is the one thing I would talk to me about. Again, one of the core fundamental issues of franchises. Let's be very clear right now. There is nothing intuitive about running a franchised business, about being a franchisor. It's not like, oh, this all just can make sense. That there, just because you find some attorney or consultant who's spending $100,000 or more to create your franchise disclosure document, do you know how to be a franchisor? Of course not. And just as when you sold that franchise to that franchisee and you can't believe that they paid you a $40,000 franchise fee and signed the agreement, you're really excited. Do you think that franchisee knows how to be a franchisee? Of course not.
No.
Now, anybody can learn it. And so as a franchisor, so if you're a young franchisor, one of the most important things you can ever do is profoundly understand what is the role and responsibility of the franchisor and play it to the best of your ability. And then make sure that you understand what is the role and responsibility of a franchisee and make sure they're playing it to the best of their ability. And that all then ties back to the whole structure of managing expectations. Because let's say in order to get that sale done, that you made all these promises that you're never going to be able to deliver, and then they get into the business, and now all of a sudden, everything you said that you do for them. What? You mean I have to run this business? I have to do the marketing? I have to do all these things? And they didn't think they did? They thought if I paid you something, won't you make it successful? Because you had these incredibly mismanaged expectations. And my view is that that's absolutely, that tears at the fabric of an organization, is when you have these mismanaged expectations, because I'm expecting you to do all these things for me. And maybe they're the wrong expectations. We all know that in franchising, listen, most of us are taking a very small portion off the top revenue line. I don't have the resources to run that business for them. If I do, I should be running it myself. Because my 7% royalty does not give me the resources to run a business for a franchisee. And I have this conversation with our prospective franchisees all the time. Let's understand this right up front. This is a franchise business. And what does that mean? This is your business. This is your business. I'm licensing you to use my operating model. I'm licensing you to use my brand. Now, you tell me how you're going to run that business, how you're going to follow the system. What are you going to do to invest in the business that you now own? And we can talk about outcome. But you've got to be really clear there right up front, and especially in these younger franchisors, it's so hard to not overpromise and underdeliver. But if you're going to make it, you can only sell from where you are. So if you're pitching this as a sophisticated franchise system that has all the bells and whistles, as if I was in a McDonald's franchisee, and you're just Mr. Franchisor that's getting started with 10 units, and that you create this expectation, what's going to happen? Litigation. And so you have to say, no. Look, if you're looking for an established, well-run system that gives you all the support you possibly could have, why are you talking to me? I've got 10 units. I've got this incredible concept. I'm going to be the McDonald's of whatever, but we're not there yet. And I need you. And if this is a vision that you can share with me, then we have something to talk about. But let's be very clear. I don't have a lot to offer you at this point, because look at my staff. Look at what I've got. And so they'll either buy it or they won't. But you're buying where you are.
That's great advice. Let's shift a little bit to franchisees. So both with Joint, but also your last 30 years. What are some attributes of the most successful franchisees? Why do you think some of them succeed while some of them struggle in the same exact concept?
That's such a simple answer, because again, let's try to understand this relationship. How many times I'm going to go out into that unit and see it? I mean, you can imagine how many units I get to if I've got 1,000 out there, or I've got a staff right now. There's about 120 in corporate staff that are out in the field doing things, and I've got 1,000 units out there. So just do the math. How often are they in that unit? Rarely. Let's be real. Okay, yes, we have our programs where we go out to, every 6 months we do an analysis of the clinic. We call it a patient evaluation assessment, and we have all these things. We have a lot of touch points, but in the end of the day, that you do not have the time and resources to make an unsuccessful person successful. And so what I've learned in 38 years of doing this is that you can never overcome the quality of who that franchisee is. And there's always this huge range of performance in the top performing units versus the bottom performing units, especially in the small box retail space. And that your greatest franchisees are those most successful business people. So what we're doing is taking successful people and providing them an operating model that they can channel all of their incredible qualities into and make it viable. It's not the model itself. And I've seen A1 locations absolutely driven to the ground by a franchisee. I've seen locations that I'm like, you know what, you're going to have to sign a waiver because I absolutely will not sign off on that location. And you are so adamant that you know your market so well and you can make this work. And this isn't the first time you've done it with this model. Then, all right, sign the waiver and tell me I'm not no responsibility for that site because you say you're going to make it work. And I've seen your track record where you do make it work in the other franchise units you own, so that I'll take the risk with you and see those very successful. And what's the common denominator? Who's driving the business?
So strong operator.
Strong operator. You can't overcome it. You really can't. Yeah. It's that franchising can't make unsuccessful people successful. Franchising is providing a channel where a successful person can take an operating model and make it really thrive. Now the challenge is, especially in those early years of a young franchisor, is that you've not had to deal with when you sell to the wrong person and all the challenges that creates. And how many young franchisors would say at this point, if I'd known who they were going to be and the problem I was going to have with them, I never would have sold it to them. Well, in the beginning, it's hard not to sell because you're just so excited someone will write you a check.
Yeah. I mean, it's advice I give. People ask me all the time about franchising. I said, the best thing you can do is learn to say no more often, because you're going to get that person's fee today. You're going to spend it today. Now you're married to that person for the next 20 years. So it could be a nightmare. So I've had a lot of ton of examples where we have a struggling franchise. A franchisee opens and he's struggling and he swears it's location or he swears it's something else. He sells it to somebody else and it goes through the roof. Yeah. Like it goes right back to normal. To me, my answer is you just go back to the systems. You just go back to running the systems, staff for the sales you want, more so like in the restaurant business. But, like we'd have franchisees that open up and chronically understaff and treat their people poorly so that they have turnover. And they're just always, they never quite get it. That store then struggles. It gets in the hands of a successful operator that just goes back to operating the right way and sales go right back up.
Exactly. 100%. Yeah. Follow the system. And again, in the younger years, the challenge is there is no system. When they were first sold the first franchises here, is that they weren't selling because they had this sophisticated, training and ongoing support program that eliminated all these potential challenges or risks that you would face. I mean, and again, it's a different entrepreneur, it's a different franchisee who's coming in at that stage. And in fact, for example, in the Joint, one of our number one franchisees for years and years and years was one of the first franchisees in the system, and absolutely had the best, highest volume clinic for years and years and years. And he would talk to you and he said, the wonderful thing at the beginning was that I could do what I want. It was a great concept, but I basically built all my systems myself. He was a very successful business person. He saw the opportunity, the model, and that yes, he would act. He thought he knew more than corporate ever did. And in some ways, he was right. And so, guess what? Fast forward, now here we are. We're going to be having our 25th anniversary this year. Is that in the end, he sold his business because the tightening of the standards, the focus on consistency and doing it. I know you did it all your own way, but guess what? That doesn't work anymore. We're trying to create a more cohesive, consistent system. And for him, it was it made more sense to sell, and he started his own franchise. And so,
good.
you've got a different franchisee in those early years than you have when you're more mature and all your systems are in place. And you say, look, just follow the system. If you follow the system, you can make it work. And
Yeah.
that's good as long as you have a sound operating system in place.
Yeah, no, it's true. I look too. Look, anytime I ever look at a concept, there's a spectrum of the best one down to the worst one. It's like, go ask the most successful franchisees what they do. Time and time and time again, all they do is operate, they execute. But to your point, if the systems aren't good and they're following systems to a T, that's not good either.
Right, and the franchisor learns that over time, and the market itself changes. So you end up doing different products or services, and so you have to add that to your portfolio, and you have to put the systems behind that to support it. And so it's an evolution. I mean, no one starts where they're going to end. And that's the real power of the franchise model. Is it's really another way to talk about franchising, is it's the business of accelerated learning, because that you aren't just learning from your own experience, you're absorbing, in our case, 1,000 units out there and the experiences from that, and you're benefiting the whole network. So you take those best practices, bring them back in, roll it out across the network, and all boats rise. And that you can't do that on your own.
How do you as a franchisor keep the joint fresh? Because it's a 25-year-old company, 1,000 units. It's not anymore sort of this neat new idea that everyone's jumping on board with.
Sure.
This is a mature business. So like, how do you keep it fresh? How do you keep people hitting systems every single day?
Well, it's such a great question, Dan. And again, another way I describe I describe franchising is, franchising really is. Franchising is the business of forced listening. Now, what do I mean by that? Is that, okay, we have our operating models, you have to have permission to do all these different things. And that what happens is that your best ideas absolutely come from your franchisee. They're on the line level. They're forcing you to innovate. They're saying, hey, look at, why don't we do it? There's so many stories of some of the greatest ideas in franchising come from the franchisees, not from corporate. And my view of that, the reason is that your franchisees have so much at stake. They're on the line in a way that when you're sitting in the puzzle palace, you're not getting that same direct experience from your consumer about what you need to be doing or how you need to be changing. I talk about this all the time. If you really understand how does any business stay in business, is if they can do one thing, the only thing that will keep you in business, and it doesn't matter what it is, only one thing to keep you in business, and that is you stay relevant to the consumer that you're serving. So the minute you lose relevancy, your business is dead. It just is time. And so then the question is, okay, well, all right, that's so simple. I have to stay relevant to my consumer, whether I'm a consultant or whether I'm a franchise system or whatever it is. And is that, well, how do I do that? And it's a very, very simple answer. You listen to your customers because they're telling you everything. Dan, I have so many different sayings, and one of my sayings is, you know what? Everybody's telling you everything you need to know, and nobody's listening. And when you're running a corporate world, I mean, who's on the line level with your customer? Who is the lowest paid employee? And so that lowest paid employee knows everything. They know every customer. They're coming in, and the customer's saying, why are you selling these blue dresses? They're terrible. So that low level employee goes to his manager and says, hey, nobody likes the blue dresses. So what does that manager say to the salesperson? Sell the blue dresses or I fire you. That's how it works. Well, if it's not that low-level employee, it's a franchisee, and he's like, hey, look at it. Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't you doing that? And they force you to listen to them. And I do this I do a training class for all of our new franchisees every month. And at one point I say to them, okay, listen, I need you to write this down. Write this down right now. If you don't listen to anything else I said, this is really, really important. And so I watch them, because we're doing this online, I'm watching them. They're all just ready to write down. They think something really important is going to come out. And I say, now write this down. Every idea that a franchisee has is not a good one. And they're looking at me, and I say, now write that down. And then I said, now let me give you the corollary. The best ideas come from our franchisees. And so it's in that dynamic tension of understanding that a no is not a no, and that you have to listen to your franchisees on the line level and pull out those incredible ideas, but not all of them. And so if you can manage that aspect, that's absolutely how you keep your system vibrant and growing and moving forward, because what you're doing now is you're meeting the needs, you're staying relevant to who your consumer is. And the only way you can stay relevant is you listen to them. It's really hard to listen to consumers sitting in your corporate office. But when you're on the line every day talking to those consumers and saying, why are you doing this? Why haven't you done that? Have you ever thought about this? That's where all the magic is. That's what keeps you relevant. And that's the power of the franchise model, is that the very structure of the relationship, if you're running it effectively, gives you that information.
Yeah. How's franchising changed in the last 20 years, 30 years? Like how's it changed? How's it different today? We didn't have tech stacks that we have now, but like to you, how have things changed?
In some ways, it's changed so profoundly and absolutely driven by technology. I cannot I mean, it's so overwhelming to me, and we're also used to it, is because it's like the frog in the pond, in the boiling pot of water, or the soon to be boiling pot of water. You just get used to it, and you don't even know it. So we're carrying around these cell phones that are more powerful than the computer that took the Apollo to the moon, and we don't even care. We don't even know how much power that is. And so if you think about franchising, what is a franchise? What you're doing is to transfer technology in a relatively short period of time. The way we did that in the 20 years ago is so profoundly different than the technology that drives it, the webinars, the Zoom calls, the ease in creating all your documentation. I mean, just creating a sales brochure. 20 years ago, there's a nice sales brochure, and you had to have them because you as a franchisor held all the information. That'd be like $20 a pop. And today it's online. It costs nothing. And so you have just imagine, remember when we had to deal with documents and you had to send them in the mail, and then, all of a sudden FedEx come around, and then all of a sudden a fax machine, and just who would want to use a fax machine to transfer a document today? And so the technology has transformed the way in which a franchise system operates on every level, whether it's in the training, whether it's in operations, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in franchise sales. And you can kind of look at each of these elements. To me, franchise sales is another area that's changed so profoundly. Because in the early days of franchising, if you're doing franchise sales, you as a franchisor are the holder of all the information. There is no access to your business outside of you providing it to that franchisee. And so you have this very careful dance of providing more information over time as they give you information so that they can learn about your business and see if it's something that they want to invest in. Well, that's absolutely the opposite today. If you don't have a website that basically lays out everything, so that because by the time you're talking to somebody, if they've already done their due diligence, they've read your website, they've seen all the pieces that are there, and so they're just validating what they believe you are. And so you have no control over the information that they're collecting because it's everywhere, whether it's bad, franchisees online saying things you don't want to hear, or all these websites, I mean, everything's out there. And so, to me, this is just one of the incredible changes in that period, is this absolute change of who controls information as you go through that decision-making process.
When I got in this business 32 years ago or so, there weren't a lot of big franchisees. Like I remember a lot of franchisees they got into franchising to make a good living, some of them to make a very, very good living. You had some franchisees that had a lot of stores, but nowadays it's like really common. You have companies, private equity companies that are big franchisees. I went to the multi-unit show in Vegas a month ago, and it's like a 15 or 20 unit franchisee was small compared to the people I was meeting. Like
Absolutely.
I was meeting some huge groups, and it's just like, good golly, I'm going to have somebody on my podcast next week. He's got 150 franchises. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, wow, it's just different. So, I mean, there's tremendous wealth being made in franchising.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. One of the other changes, and part of that too, is not just the mumbos, those large multi-unit operators, but also the role private equities played in franchising. And if you roll that back, who stepped into the first private equity ever invested in franchising? Warren Buffett, when he bought International Dairy Queen. And in the early years when I was at IFA, Wall Street would have nothing to do with franchising. They didn't understand it. They just seemed quirky. I mean, there's no assets. I mean, what? Now, over time, they've realized, whoa, this is a capital light, sticky business, and private equity has found it. And so everything has changed. But that's a definite, there's whole seminars on the difference of the impact that private equity has had on the franchise, community.
Yeah. So you guys are public. What's good about being public? What's sometimes not so good about being public?
Well, it's like everything. There's strengths and weaknesses. The bad side of being public is just the relentlessness of quarters, the extraordinary amount of time and energy and money that is being spent. We're you just with my independent. We all, as in franchising, we all have independent auditors. Well, if you're public, it's a whole different level, and so your independent auditor, all of the just the professional services that are required. I mean, the reporting requirements. I mean, it's massive and unending, and it takes a huge amount of time and energy to manage. Now that's just that piece of it. Now I get to talk about the shareholders. There is another group of stakeholders that you have to be able to manage. And oh, wait a minute, we're a franchise, so don't we have some stakeholders out there as our franchisees that also are part of this? And then you have all kinds of other stakeholders, whether it's your patients or your employees or your vendors. And so you've got lots of stakeholders that you're trying to manage. And you've just added complexity to that to be public. Now, the primary reason somebody goes public is why? Is to raise capital. We're back to capital and people. And so that if you can go public, that it can have a profound impact on your capacity to really reinvest in your business and take it to that next level. And I think this example of the Joint, that's one of the reasons we've been able to grow as fast, as quickly as we had, is the resources we were able to generate by being capital. I looked at that at Mailbox Etc. that was founded in 1980. In 1986, they went public. Back then it was a lot easier. There was no Sarbanes-Oxley. But again, that one of the reasons they became the powerhouse that they did is that by going public, in addition to the revenue that they could drive from royalty or equipment sales or whatever it was, is that they had now additional resources to reinvest in the business and do so many of those things that everybody wants that you can't afford if you're just relying on that royalty stream. And especially in the beginning, we know if you're a royalty stream driven concept, yeah, it's very thin in the early years when you need it most. And so so what do? You rely on franchise sales. And that's why you get yourself in trouble sometimes because, okay, I may not be the right franchisee, but that $40,000 is going to help me make payroll.
Yeah. No, I tell people it's not until you get your system sales to 50 million, $80 million. So your franchisee sales 50 to 80 million before that royalty actually turns into enough to run a company. Past 100 million now. Okay. Now we're talking. To get from zero to sort of 50 million is no fun. Franchising is no fun. $0 to $50 million in sales. So you have to be really, really, really committed to do it.
You do, and you also have to be incredibly careful about how you spend your resources. I mean, that's another thing you have in common. Those franchisors that survive and get through that period are just ruthless in the protection of their capital because they don't have enough. And that's I mean we all know that. I mean that it can be when you just have a whole bunch of resources. You end up using it very poorly. You invest in all these kind of things that you really shouldn't have if you really thought about it, but you can't help yourself because you have it and it's easy. And why not? I know I can make this work. And so actually being tight on capital, it gives you a discipline that is very important, to be able to build that really high performing quality system. So it's like I've seen it where a franchise, in this case, was a master franchisee, was so overcapitalized to what we were doing. This was with Mailbox, etc. That they were just from where I was sitting, and it's a master franchise. So look at it, it's their business, they're running it, they're in that country, not me. And I'm just watching them squander resources, and they don't see it that way. And then what happens is like, wait a minute, they too also need a return on their investment, and it wasn't there because that they'd spent on things they probably shouldn't have. They weren't listening.
Yeah.
So it works both sides. You can have too much, or you can have too little.
Yeah. People tend to spend the money that they have. You're right. When they don't have it, emerging brands figure it out. They figure it out, and then all of a sudden you get a bunch of PE and you spend it, and it's not always better for it. Hey, you mentioned master franchising. Is the Joint master franchise or AR?
We do regional developers. Yes, I know
Okay.
there's all kinds of language around. We call it a regional developer, and yes, we have 17 regional developers where we sell them a territory. We do a revenue split, and they're responsible to help us sell franchises and provide all the ongoing support. And
So it's better for what reasons, and then sometimes it's challenging for what reasons?
okay, it's pretty simple. First of all, if you don't have a simple model, you can't use it because when you add that third party between the franchisor and the franchisee, way too much gets lost in translation. So QSR typically won't touch a RD model because they just lose too much in translation. But if you have a simple model like frozen yogurt or chiropractic care or postal and business and communication services, it can be an incredible accelerator of growth. And that's one of the reasons that Mailbox, et cetera, had the first mover advantage it had. Even today, they created the industry, they spawned all their competitors. If you look at them today with that roughly 6,000 units out there, if you took every competitor they have today and piled them up, UPS Store still has a larger footprint than all their competitors combined. Why? Well, number one, they had a very aggressive and successful regional developer model right up front that helped accelerate their growth and nobody else could catch up. And so then when you get that first mover advantage, it's incredible. Now you have to be really, really, really careful with a regional developer model or an area developer model, because if you don't know how to manage it, you get the worst of both worlds. Okay, yes, you're doing the revenue split, but the work's not getting done, and so you got to do it yourself. And so you're paying out that royalty or the royalty split or the split on the franchise fees, and you're not getting the work done. And so you have to manage it effectively. Now, as a young franchisor, and we know we've just spent a lot of time talking about capital, but if I can sell off a territory and get a significant amount of resource, cash, for that regional developer rights as a one-time fee, that can be a significant source of capital to help you again overcome some of these challenges that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, and then the same thing applies to a master franchise, whatever you call them. They're in two businesses now. They're in the business of owning and operating their own stores to sell and train from. And then they're also in the franchise sales and support business. So they've got to be good at two things.
Absolutely. And you as a franchisor have to teach that master franchisee how to be a franchisor in addition to concept. We're back to the whole issue of concept and methodology.
Otherwise, like you said, they're getting half the fees, but you're still doing their work for them because you can't afford for the guests to have bad experience. You wind up doing it. Last question. So you've been at it a long time. You've learned a lot of lessons. Advice for your younger self. Like, what are some hard lessons that you learned that you wish that you knew earlier on?
I guess one of the things I would say is that move faster on personnel issues, and they're always hard. We're people, and the people, and we keep talking about capital and people, and that there are times when you need to make some changes, and it's really hard. And so, as I would give advice to myself, I'm a very loyal person, and so the advice I give to myself is move faster on these issues because they're not going to go away. And so you're extending the pain for everybody. And so that would be one of the lessons that I would tell myself. Again, one of the things I've learned, I love franchising. It's such an extraordinary model. It's the most unique relationship you'll ever have in business. It is absolutely, it's like a marriage in the sense that, in fact, very often franchising is compared to marriage. And what we all know, and certainly what I've learned and would be even pushing further into my younger self, is to understand how critical trust is in that long-term relationship, and how essential it is that you build it and that you protect it and that you nurture it. I mean, it's lost in a minute. You can actually strengthen trust through conflict. So it's not avoid conflict. It's just in that conflict, whether you do this or you do that is going to determine whether you are building on that trust or you are breaking that trust. But it's in the actual conflict where you have two people who have a very legitimate difference of opinion on whatever it is that in that conflict you can actually build even a more trusting relationship if you handle it effectively, appropriately. And so I would say that understand the power and importance of trust in any long-term relationship, and that's certainly franchising.
This is awesome. Thank you for all these nuggets. We got a lot of good ones from you today.
Oh, my pleasure. It's something, Dan. Like I said, I love the franchise model. It's so I have not. 38 years later, I just can't get out of it.
Yeah. No, I can tell you like it. I can tell you like it, and I'm fortunate that you're still in it. So, but thanks for being my guest, and I really appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
Absolutely, so much. I really appreciate the honor to be here.
Thanks. Hey, thanks for tuning in to Smart Franchising with FranSmart. I'm your host, Dan Rowe. If you enjoyed today's episode, this podcast is only going to get better. Please like, comment, and subscribe to hear more from the most successful franchisors and franchisees, and we'll see you next time.